Hello and welcome to my introduction to flight in the Empire Specific Fighters of PlanetSide 2, also known as ESFs. In this video I will gloss over the traits of each faction's ESF, talk about controls, and discuss the mechanics of the ESF. Each faction gets an Empire Specific fighter. The New Conglomerate used the Reaver, the Terran Republic used the Mosquito, and the Vonu Sovereignty used the Scythe. The Reaver has the hardest hitting weapons available to the ESFs, with each weapon having the highest in-class DPS compared to their equivalent faction weapons. It also has the highest vertical thrust, the strongest afterburners, but its cruising speed is joint lowest with the Scythe. The Mosquito has a smaller hitbox from all sides, the fastest cruising speed, and the lowest afterburn speed. Its vertical hover is significantly less than the Reaver's, and more so in line with the Scythe's. The weapons are all high fire rate and capacity, giving it the advantage in damage per magazine, but the overall lowest DPS per class. The Scythe is thin from a side view while also having the smallest frontal profile. From a bird's eye view, the Scythe is the biggest target. It has no drag unlike other ESFs, but like I said before, the slowest cruise speed shared with the Reaver, and the middle of the road afterburn speed. Each of its air-to-air nose guns are marginally better than the Mosquito's in DPS, and the Scythe has the best in class reloads. Their weapons are middle of the ground damage per shot wise and damage per magazine wise. Now that you know the differences between the ESFs, you can pick your ESF and learn the basic controls. All further demonstrations will be in the Reaver. Your mouse will be used for pitch and roll, while your afterburn, speed, ascend, descend, and yaw controls use keybinds. Moving your mouse from side to side will control your roll. When you move your mouse to your right, your ESF will roll to the right. Moving your mouse to the left rolls you to the left. Pitch is controlled by moving your mouse away and towards you. As you move your mouse away from you, your ESF will pitch up. While you move your mouse towards you, your ESF pitches down. You can invert the pitch if you are more comfortable with that in the general settings. Now for the keyboard portion. Yaw is controlled by your A and D keys. Hitting your A key will yaw left. Hitting your D key will yaw right. Holding or tapping shift will use your afterburner. Pressing space will move your ESF upwards vertically, while pressing control will move your ESF downwards. T is to toggle between first and third person. F or X is for the ability, and finally E is to exit. I recommend binding analog throttle to one of the keys in the AWSD area and rebinding other keys for your convenience. It is much more convenient to tap analog throttle rather than hold your S key. You might also want to use pitch keys bound to an easy to reach place like the side of your mouse. This way you can have lower sensitivity without sacrificing maneuverability. Now, onto the flight mechanics. The ESF is a bit trickier to manage than conventional aircraft. Unlike a fighter jet, it has the ability to move along 3 axes at once. For example, you can be moving forwards, sideways, and downwards, all while facing the same direction. This allows you much more maneuverability. But the hardest thing to grasp is the concept of hover fighting. Now, hover is in this game for you to land, but it can be used to grant you greater opportunity to stay on your target as well as use your afterburner for vertical thrust. Pilots can leverage this due to the directional influence of the afterburners based on your speed. If you are at rest, or extremely close to rest in terms of forward movement, the afterburner will fire downwards instead of behind you. In both the Reaver and Mosquito, there are visual representations that are easy to see when you afterburn, and the thrust is directed downwards. This is why I chose the Reaver for this tutorial. Now, to use the afterburner while hovering, you must first be hovering. So, this also brings me back to either using your S key or the analog throttle to put you into a state of hover, or some people call it hover mode. Now I guess is a good time to explain the function of analog throttle. Analog throttle basically means that at the tap of the button, your ESF will automatically try and slow down at all times. Pressing either of your throttle controls will cancel this effect, and you will need to press the key again. Even with analog throttle, there are situations in which you cannot stay in hover indefinitely, namely any situations where your ESF is facing downwards at a high angle. Getting into hover will only happen momentarily before you pick up speed and lose braking control. Now that you know how to get into hover, I will continue to explain how to stay in and afterburn in hover. Now, like I said before, the Reaver and Mossy have visual representations of the thrusters, and when you get into hover, these thrusters shift downwards. To afterburn and stay in hover, they need to stay downwards. In order to do that, you must understand what your afterburners do while pitching. If you pitch up, your afterburners will move back into flight position even while in hover. If you pitch down, you will notice that your afterburners stay locked in the downwards position. You do not have to pitch down all the way, only just enough to stay in hover. It will be up to you to figure this out, and from there on it should be easy to use it while in frontal combat. So this is why I will say that in order to use your afterburners for more than just a small burst, you will need to pitch down relative to your view. Now when I say relative, that is wherever down is according to your cockpit view, not the world. So I guess what I'm saying is use your ESF's position, and wherever the top is up, and vice versa. Doing this, you can afterburn while in hover. To start, you can perform the reverse maneuver, which you might have heard of. This involves getting into hover quickly, rolling to the side, and afterburning to face your enemy. This maneuver is a perfect representation of the flight mechanics you should learn and leverage to your advantage in order to be an efficient fighter. Practice variations of this, and if you need more instruction, be sure to check out Drax's video or simply search reverse maneuver on YouTube. My final advice is to let you know that if you want to be competent, it is going to take a bit of practice. This means some practice in VR, some duels if you can find a pilot to do them with, and most definitely, a lot of deaths while flying on live to better pilots. You have to stay motivated, and you are going to have to commit a decent amount of playtime. Do not burn yourself out trying to get better. If you want to go toe-to-toe with the ace pilots, you're going to need to put in the hours they have. This means that you would need closer to 50 or 60 hours to begin to even challenge them. So unless you have a love for flying, practice until you can beat 60 to 70% of the aircraft on your server, and then you should retain most of that skill, provided that you use an aircraft at least once in a while. The ESF is the most unintuitive vehicle in PlanetSide 2, especially if your knowledge of the mechanics is sparse. So I recommend at least learning the basics to make sure your flying experience is at least somewhat enjoyable. That's all for today, and I'm not sure if I'll make another one of these, so hopefully you enjoyed and hopefully it was helpful.